In this problem, we're giving a schedule that amortizes a loan. It's also given that the loan itself is for the amount of $500,000. So we are the issuers of the note, and we're the ones borrowing the money. So we have cash debited for $500,000, and we have a credit to a long-term liability, in this case called long-term note payable. This is the issuance. This happens at the very beginning of the period. Of the year. So you can always refer to this as January 1st. And that's what this is here, is the very beginning of a period. And so it relates to, in terms of the table here, the very first column shows a balance beginning for that loan of $500,000. As you see later, this loan amount is reduced as the loan is amortized on a monthly basis. So even though this loan is really for about 23 years, we're only going to be looking at the first few periods so that you see how the amortization schedule works. Now, to begin with, let's talk about period number 1, which would be, in essence, January, end of January. So after the first period, meaning the first month, you would be paying the investor, the people that actually loaned you the money, you will be paying them a amount of $3,597.30. This is a fixed amount. Now, how do we know what the amount is? It's possibly part of a different lesson. But very briefly, if you want to figure it out, it will simply be the present value, meaning in this case would be really the amount of the loan, over the present value of annuity factor, which will be again part of a different lesson of what table you would use or what formula you would use to actually get this done. But you can always, if you want to, you can always study this formula that I have placed in here, and that really gives you the answer to that, to what the formula is for this. You can also use the present value, the payment function in Excel to get to the same amount. But again, doesn't matter in this case because we're just simply given that amount. Now, this is the amount that as you service this loan, in other words, pay back the loan, a portion of this payment is interest expense, and another portion is a pay down on that loan every month. So really, this table is really sort of breaking out this amount into its two components, so that you know how much do you reduce the loan by. Now, if you take this $35.97 in the month of January, how much of that is interest expense? Well, in this case, it will be $2,500. How do we know that? As you can see on top here, I am showing you that the amount that goes in this column each period would depend on what is in column number 4, which will be this here, beginning of the period. So at the beginning of January, we look at what was the ending in the prior period. So in this case, it would be $500,000. So we actually, I'm going to just do this. $500,000 was my beginning balance in period 1. I multiply that times 0.5%, so 0.5%. How do I know that's the amount? Well, the initial given in the problem is that you have a 6% loan. This is expressed on an annual basis. So this is a percentage for the year. Given that we're using months here, there's 12 months, so 6% divided by 12 months would give you the 5%. So then that's the amount, or that's the percentage you use on the monthly basis on the balance beginning for that loan. So in this case, it will be that times 0.5 will give you exactly $2,500. That's what goes in the interest expense column. Since now you know that's the portion of interest expense that comes out of this payment, the remainder, or $35.97.30 minus a $2,500 for interest expense, that remainder would be how much this loan is amortized or paid down by. So $500,000 minus a pay down of $1097.30 gives you an ending balance for period 1 of $498,902.70. Now, given that, notice what is then the entry that we use for that first payment. Notice here, the first payment will be actually done at the end of January. So that would be simply debit the expense, or in this case interest expense for 2005, again coming from there. The cash itself, the payment itself, is fixed. So this is already given as $3597.30, and the pay down on the loan, or the pay down on that long-term note payable, would be a debit of $1097. Remember that the liabilities have a credit balance, so when you debit them, you reduce them. So that loan balance will be going down by this amount, down to $498,902. If you were to then do the second payment, then you would simply do the same thing. You would take the $498 here, that's the beginning balance of the loan at the beginning of period number 2, or in this case February. And given that we already know that we're using a monthly percentage of 0.5%, that will give you $2,494.51. And that's how we get to that number right there. And again, we go back to the payment. So this payment minus the interest expense, this then gives you the pay down of the loan amount. So you go $498,902.70, that's the beginning balance in period 2, minus a pay down of $1,102.79, gives you an ending balance of $497,799.91. And that's how you get to these numbers here. Interest expense, $294.94.51. The payment is always the same, given $3597.30, and the difference will be the pay down. One last point here goes back to the initial issuance. So we remember that in the issuance on 1/1, we borrowed $500, cash goes up, long-term note payable goes up as well by the same amount, so we have that. Now a portion of this amount is actually due within the first 12 months of the year. That makes that portion of this long-term payable current. So it's no longer long-term. So we have to reclassify a portion of this. How much of that is reclassified? Well, it comes from this column here. If I go down and add up all of the pay downs for all periods from January through December, the total would be $13,535.85. That's the whole overall pay down of the loan in the first 12 months of that first year. So that's the amount from this long-term payable that is reclassified at the same date as the issuance. So if you go down to that entry, you would see that as this. You would actually reduce the long-term note payable account by that amount. It's the same thing, as you can see, and basically transfer it to a current account, current portion of long-term notes payable right there. And that's how you do the reclassification.